if you could demonstrate, no, I can't think of a way that you could demonstrate altruism, right? I can't see, even in conformity to the law. Even if the law says, if a person feels X, you have to do X, and you conform to the law, so you do X, you still don't have, which is, I hope I talk about this in a second, you still don't have, I'm going to talk about it in a little bit, you don't have epistemic, we don't have, it would have to be sort of, mathematically speaking, it would have to be sort of, even if you were able to demonstrate it deontologically, in some sense, you could use sort of like epistemic modal to demonstrate that you don't have epistemological access to that motivation, and you don't. So what that means is, even if you say that my action is altruistic, the burden of proof isn't on the person claiming that your action is egoistic. I say it's no, I'm telling you, you would have to demonstrate that it is in fact altruistic. However, in order for you to demonstrate the altruism of the act in deontological sense, you would have to immediately warrant the fact that I don't have epistemic access to your motivations. Thus, the argument would conclude it's absolutely not the case. You can't do it. You can't do it. I swear, I wish I was a billionaire, because I would have like prizes. I would have like $1 million prize for anybody who could prove, that logically speaking, prove altruism, right? I would love to see the formulation to try and prove it. You can't do it. There is no epistemic access to the motivation of the individual moral agent, even on especially on deontological terms. You can't access it. The law says to do it, so you do it, right? Yeah. So they would have to demonstrate an act that is not egoistic. You'd have to demonstrate altruism, which is inherently impossible since we cannot access the intent governing the moral agent's act, right? There is no epistemic access to the moral agent. It's too early in the morning for it to be this deep. I hope I didn't just lose everybody, right? I hope I didn't lose everybody. And I'm actually trying to think how you could do it. The agent knows, so it would be like, the agent knows, right, we're talking about two different agents. I can't know what you know, right? There is no access. Modally speaking, epistemic modal, you wouldn't be able to access the thoughts, the knowledge base, and know it with certainty. That's the caveat, right? The caveat, just one caveat, would be that the knowledge that we would have to reach would have to be certain. We know it with certainty. You might be able to approximate the knowledge. I'll grant that, right? You might be able to approximate the fact that the moral agent is motivated by altruism as an approximation. But you can't say that you know that with certainty other than being the moral agent, right? Nietzsche might even go so far, it would be harder to demonstrate this logically though, that even the moral agent can't know that. The only way to go about demonstrating that, disproving that, and this is very, very technical now, and I apologize, this is a super deep, you guys wanted me to take it to the abyss, but this is super deep. Nietzsche might even say, or Nietzschean, I would say, that even the moral agent's sort of belief that my action and my access to my own epistemological motivations could be self-deluded because I could introduce acrosia, right? Problems of acrosia, the disassociation between my intent and act, and I don't even have cognitive access to those motives that underlie act. There's always some doubt that can be raised, right? And that's all you need, right? You just need a little bit of doubt. So all in red now. This is an aside, and this is me, right? This is me trying to process sort of what I just said. Okay, well, all of this is me. If it's not in quotes, it's me. But this is like specifically sort of the idea. And if I were to write on, sort of philosophy in the 21st century, it would sound something like this, right? This would be sort of the tone. I might allow for theoretical altruism, right? There is a sense in which you can theoretically talk about altruism because it makes sense, right? It's not about me, it's about you. Theoretically, conceptually, sure. But epistemologically, from an epistemic standpoint, all actions are egoists. the burden of proof isn't on the egoist, the burden of proof is on the altruist. The person that's claiming altruism has the burden to demonstrate that it is in fact motivated for strictly the concern of the other person. So now to get technical, there is an epistemological inaccessibility to altruistic actions for all of the reasons that I said before. And Nietzsche specifically said this before. Which is not to deny the possibility, right? I'm not saying that it's wholly impossible. I mean, I think it's impossible, but there's always rooms for demonstration. It would be a beautiful proof if you could demonstrate it. But it is to deny any epistemological accessibility to knowing this fact. I would say that without a doubt, it is categorically, epistemologically impossible to demonstrate altruism when we're talking about two parties. You could never demonstrate with certainty an altruistic act to a second party. We have two, assuming a deontological structure for the action. I'm not talking about theology because I don't have any logical access to a formulated system. There is a formulated system, a deontological system that we could discuss and construct to talk about the motivation of the act, right? There isn't an epistemological access to that system. I can't have access. So it would be impossible to demonstrate altruism when we have at least two parties, two or more parties. There might be possibly some way, I would have to think about it, and I'll think about it after I finish the video. There might be epistemologically some way to demonstrate altruistic action when there is just the moral agent contemplating his or her own motivation. Maybe. Even then, I would say, under Nietzschean terms, that it would be problematic, though less problematic than where two parties are involved, because the moral agent, him or herself, might not have cognitive access to the intents which are and the desires specific. And now I would need better psychology. I don't know. I would, I'd give this to psychologists and psychoanalysts and psychiatrists to incorporate. It would be awesome interdisciplinary work. That you don't have cognitive access to the desires. Desires motivate values. Values are what governs the way in which we sort of function in the world. Thus, our desires are related to the way that we act. However, individuals don't have, in all cases, cognitive access to their desires. The desires function in the background and sort of send signals that we're not aware of that get us to act in the world. I want to stop smoking. However, I can't because of physiological things. I want to do X. I think I really want to do it, but I don't. Right? Acrasia becomes a problem. So that even in the case when we're talking about the internal logical structuring of the rationale behind an individual moral agent, the agent, him or herself, might not have cognitive access to those desires that motivate the act. Thus, it could be the case, conceptually, it could be the case conceptually that that desire is in fact egoistic rather than altruistic. So, yeah, it's pretty deep. Okay. No egoism at all exists that remains within itself and does not encroach. One furthers one's ego, always at the expense of others. My ego encroaches on yours. And I'm going to give you a specific example. And, this is sort of a poor depiction, but the arrow goes into your space. Your arrow comes into my space. Remember, it's not my space, that's retarded. But it's not the case that there's any altruism that exists. It's all egoism. It's all egoistic. And egoism encroaches on the ego of others, right? So now we start to have conceptions of dominance, of power in its sort of colloquial sense, right? The ego becomes almost spatial, right? There is a sense in which the ego can literally transform the space dynamics. And I talked about this, even though I didn't tell you I was discussing this in the series, I really was. In my Ethics in Qualitative Research series, which I just concluded, the final few hours, the final hour really, or maybe 2 hours, was about sort of gesticulation and body language and, micro action and blah, 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 and how I can use nonverbal action to convey a sense of, mirroring the other